I found that this met with some enthusiasm. There were people who were involved in role playing publishing whom this resonated with. There were people whom also saw this as untapped feeding grounds that they could become. You see, in independent comics publishing, you always have to look out for the guy. The guy says, I'll take care of all that distribution stuff for you. Here's a little front money. Hey, I'm going to have a convention. And you're like, oh, I found the guy, right? I'm in now. No, beware the guy.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of them popped up at this point as well.
Right.
So
Yeah, right.
for lack of a better word, my essays had become a little bit notorious. When I went to my first role playing game convention in 2000, I was startled to realize that all these game designers whom I actually quite liked or enjoyed their games or thought had interesting ideas knew who I was, which was a puzzle. And so at that point, I also met some people who happened to be local where I lived. That was a coincidence. Who had independently published their own role playing game. In fact, I was directed by Jonathan Tweet, thank you, Jonathan, to go check out several different booths that he was familiar with of self published role playing games based on what he and I had talked about. So I went and I looked, and one of them, I was like, how did you guys manage to do this? You know, did you just use your mommy's money? I mean, how did you do this? And they, a whole bunch of nose ring wearing little Chicago rockers, said, you know, actually, no, we got some help and consulting on this and we nailed it. We're doing good. And I was like, you're in Chicago? We got to talk.
Right. Right.
And part of it was jealousy. It was like, how could these little, you know, snot noses actually manage to do this? After I had seen group after group after group after group of similar snot noses completely walk into the, you know, the wall with it.
Right.
And
Right.
and they totally helped me out. They totally helped me understand a way that you could publish a book without destroying yourself. And and so I said, all right, I'll put out 500 books and I'll put them into some stores, and that way I can say I can finally live the dream. I had a role playing game published in, you know, to get it in the game store. But that's all I want. I mean, I just want to sort of get that little sprinkle of sugar there on my life and keep on with this
Well,
PDF
right.
thing because that's the smart thing to do. You know, people can print them up as books as they want. I won't stop them. So sadly, I ended up spearheading the book and PDF two-pronged publishing and getting eaten for a while by the book publishing.
Right.
Because what we were doing at Gen Con, what I did now with my site, The Forge, now was up and running. I've founded it with two other guys and was basically the content developer for The Forge and the organizer of how this is to be done. And
Right.
what this means is that we started doing convention a convention within a convention at Gen Con in the States, in which small little people like me were able to bring their games and we'd be all in one place and be self-supportive, you know, and mutually supportive and create kind of a culture of appreciation of the diversity of role playing, physically and procedurally. This had its bad side. It created status for having done it. That's bad. It also created, again, the focus on, you know, the physical book as the thing. Um, and
Shiny artifact.
I could see this kind of developing. Some of the people who had jumped in on this were very good at that side of things and began thinking very much in terms of building a brand, the Forge as a brand. Um, my resistance to this basically created a lot of enemies. So and basically, I downsized the Forge after 2007 to the rage of most of the people who had thrown in the most effort into it with me.
Right. Right.
Downsized it, says it will never be a brand. This is all about the people who are showing up with a game in their backpacks and going, what do I do? That's what this is for. So I basically, now I'm not saying this was a matter of amazing principle on my part. It is widely understood as idiosyncratic stupidity. As the people who went on to brand indie, looting that name from our URL, the people who went on to brand indie, by which indie no longer meant independently published, it meant hip indie alt rock, right? That got going.
Right.
And so
Right.
the people who were very good at branding that, and also, oddly enough, standardizing it.
Right.
Just as the people who branded themselves the OSR with their spurious claim to originalism, basically the people involved in those two lines of branding were very, very, very good at doing exactly that. And both of them have their roots in the activities at the Forge.
Wow.
So, but both of them also created a cone of silence about it. So the frustrating thing for me, of course, is merely ego. Wait a minute, didn't we do this? But much more importantly is this: we had a decade, 1996 to 2006, I would say, of the internet phenomena that I have just talked about, where your commerce had no central platform. There was no drive-through RPG. There was nothing like that. And in 2007, 2008, drive-through RPG and a few other things got created along in tandem with social media. And
right.
Everything changed right there.
That must have been really also one turnover in that.
Well, it was just as profound as the late 90s. It is not the internet that changed everything. That's what changed everything. The internet as such was a leveler of things.
Right.
A destroyer of things. This was the new city that, instead of the hippie commune wilderness that could have persisted, this was the new dystopian city that got built on the ruins. And so, what do I mean by dystopian? And why is there a cane around here I can shake at the screen? Am I just rambling? Is it merely, another fat beard cursing the youth?
Right.
I'm going to suggest not. There are two steps. One is this first step of the introduction of social media, which made discourse about role playing and participation in participation with others about it. Well, now in retrospect, we can see what a lot of those were. It's the creation of bubbles. Number one, bubbles means captive markets. That's what they are. And so there's that issue, first of all. Second was the intensification of what I might call the indie or story games subculture and the OSR subculture, which in reality was overlapping in participants greatly, but not socially, not in terms of branded participation. And then that's one thing. But a little bit further on, crowdfunding happened. And 2012 is the year that I will pinpoint as the year when role-playing was captured by crowdfunding. Now, crowdfunding, in terms of its raw definition, would seem like it would be my chocolate and peanut butter. Its raw definition sounds great to me.
Right.
But as it happened, Kickstarter had specifically had several features that I won't even really blame its creators for. They're reasonably appropriate for people designing new widgets, right? But deadlines for production of something, the the notion that you were buying something, not pledging to see it get produced as part of helping somebody through a development project, but
Right.
buying something. And then there are a few things that the developers of Kickstarter never even dreamed of that people made up on their own, like stretch goals. But the hucksterism of it, the product acquisition, and the shininess of the promised product, high production value, returns to role playing everything that we had blowtorched in 2000
Oh, wow. Right.
successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We
Right. That makes a
returned
lot of sense.
all those things. And the new branding of the subcultures, OSR and indie, and quickly D&D, TSR, Hasbro sensing, you know, sensing
Smell
the,
opportunity.
the stench of, of mal earned profit, draws Hasbro, from its lair. And so now we have these basically huckster driven and bad product delivering cultures. And that sounds terrible, right? I mean, I'm living in Sweden where, Vessen and Mörkborg and all these things have been crowdfunded and kickstarted, and they're so successful and they're beautiful. And I'm sitting there and I'm feeling like it's the 90s again or the late 80s, and I'm talking to a West German who tells me that this thing that they have can't be shit. It's very expensive. And I find it actually pretty repulsive. I have stopped pledging to Kickstarter for product. I still pledge occasionally, but I pledge
Right.
for no reward, not even the PDF. I don't want them rushing it to production on a deadline. I don't approve of that. It's bad for game design.
Because I feel like that's the definitely culture right now.
Oh yeah,
This
it's the defining culture of role playing.
yeah, like what you're saying right now. It's like when I'm thinking about it, it really makes a lot of sense. Definitely with crowdfunding is you see it all the time is where people yeah rush for a deadline for a product that is shiny because it has a great cover, has great cover art. Maybe you get you pledge and you get a cool, I don't know, miniature or
Right, right.
whatever BTT token, whoever cares. And at the end of the day, the product is fine or mediocre or maybe even subpar,
Right.
but it's all about the shiny. It's
Well,
all
not
about
only
like
that, but isn't it a
you
point almost of pride now? I mean, you can go and watch the YouTube videos and they'll scan their shelfie and say, and I haven't played one of them yet, as if that was good.
right, exactly. It's
And
because it's like you said, the bubbles, the captive market. They know how to. Well, I think Dungeons and Dragons has, bro.
and don't forget too that Amazon comments and Kickstarter comments are very obviously social media platforms of their own with everything that implies. So
Right,
the basically I find the whole thing quite disheartening. And that's why Adepts Play started here in Sweden 4 years ago. Does not emphasize product delivery. And in fact, I have many games that I'm currently designing and enjoying designing greatly. And people who get involved with Adepts Play often begin by saying, "Oh, wow, Dreams of Fire, a companion game to Circle of Hands. When's it coming out?" And I say, that is not part of the model. I'd love to finish this game. If I do so before I die, that's fantastic. But if I produce a thing that I'm going to call Dreams of Fire, it will have been baked in play and loved.
right, right.
And you're going to get the product of that just like you got with Sorcerer. You're not going to get something that I whipped up because there's a fan base for Circle of Hands.
Right, right.
And, you know, basically put into production through Vapor by capturing a particular artist who, for, you know, remuneration, will produce all this great art for it. Do I have a number of great artists who would love to do that? Yes,
Yeah.
I do. And so, you know, and I did 2 successful Kickstarters. One was for the reissue of Sorcerer with new covers, and one was for Circle of Hands. Both of, I mean, then there was a small one for Slay with Me that didn't make the total, but then the other two did, and I strategized it with my lessons from the past about how to make sure that they did not simply dig me a hole that I then filled in, because that's what happens to most Kickstarters. The expense, they don't know what it takes to actually print and ship a book, and they don't realize that they are digging a hole, and that the best they can hope for from their take is to fill in the hole.
Break even or something.
So in fact, the worst thing that could happen to most small press producers of role-playing games right now, that is to say a person, you know,
Right.
2 people, 3 people, whatever, but someone. The worst thing that could happen to them is a successful Kickstarter campaign.
In a way.
Well, they'll end up in the hole. They'll end up with a lot more debt and unfulfillable obligations than they started with. And I've watched marriages, you know, just explode over this. I've watched people become clinically depressed and change their name and move far away. I've seen, you know, all sorts of dreadful things. And it's not because your Kickstarter doesn't fund, it's because it did.
Right.
And this is what's happening. So it's just like the 90s, right? The small, the hopeful fellow with their little role playing game. They and their and I said fellow, but it's, you know, often a multi-gender team, right? A few people get together and they have played the hell out of this, and it's pretty damn good. And they've got their amateurish picture on the cover, and this system is pretty damn fun.
Right.
And they, you know, get it out into the game stores, and then they have to mulch their 9,000 copies at the end of the year so they don't get taxed on it. And that's the end of their company. Imagine going to all that work and getting your 10,000 copies printed. And you've been to one convention and you sold 100 copies at the convention. And you've got a copy in like 50 game stores across the country, just like you always dreamed of. And then here it comes January 1st, and your tax guy says, you got to get rid of that shit. The full retail value is considered an asset, and you're going to be taxed on it. And that's all your house payments for the next year.
Wow. That's
and you take it off to the dump and you mulch it. And that's the same situation that people in their funded Kickstarters are facing today, with the added defamation of unable to fulfill the Kickstarter as the product as promised, or not as quickly as they promised, or not as, you know, glamorously as promised, or anything of the sort. I mean, you betray, right, your pledges, the promise you made to deliver product,
right,
and you are fucked on the internet forever.
Forever, right? You're ruined forever because everyone will just remember you as that one publisher that.
Well, not only that, but, you know, piling on defamation. You're cool if you pick on that guy. Oh, that guy sucks. Oh yeah, he sucks.
Right.
So this is a terrible situation, and that's why I focus now on enjoying play and sharing among us why we enjoy play. And I focus, therefore, on consulting for game design, which specifically says I do not consult for publishing. I don't. You do if you can take it through game design to a point where you have that sense of satisfaction that you and I are talking about right now, then you make a decision about publishing, and I'm out of there. Go talk to somebody who's good at that stuff. The processes and purposes of marketing presuppose that the product is crap. It might not be. I'm not saying all products are crap or that if you pay money for it, it's a
Right,
bad thing. I'm not that radical. What I am
right,
saying is that the processes and purposes of marketing presuppose that the product is crap.
right.
They
I
are
understand what you're
supposed to
saying.
work in that circumstance, or else it's not considered good marketing.
Right,
And that's what they're taught to do. You go to business school, that's what you're taught to do. Be a marketing major,
right,
that's what you're taught to do. So the point being that if you want to put things into production for distribution in a way that is risk based, right? You're losing money by getting it out there. If that's
right.
what you're going to do, then you need to talk to people who are good at that. And
Okay,
that's not me.
right,
That is
right, right.
profoundly not me. I am the worst possible.
Right,
Now,
right.
what strangely has occurred? Okay, you asked about my customer base because I still do offer the PDFs of my stuff, and I probably should put them into physical form because I like the science fiction book, SF Bokhandeln here in Sweden, and I wouldn't mind like giving them physical, copies, and that it's fun basically as long as it's not painful. I'd be happy to do that. Um, and I'm sort of working on it in a too slow way. But it's not about, but that's not where I want the company to be actually gaining. That's not where I want Atom Express to be actually a successful company. I want it to be coming from consulting for game design. I want it to be from the Patreon, such as it is. And I want it to be from, oh, and by the way, Adam's Play, the website where I think is the thing, is not behind a paywall. That's that's what we do.
Right.
Support me on the Patreon, and it's because you like the fact that I'm doing that, as well as a few things that are a little extra for the Patreon, but they, by definition, they can't be primary. So, and then the other place is teaching classes. So I have slowly worked up a curriculum about role playing and its mechanics and its behaviors and its things about it. And I started teaching them last year, and that's actually been tremendously fun. So I'm always teaching two classes at any given time. I have an introductory one and a whole bunch of others. And
Um, how do I get in contact for like a classic? By the way, this that
well, that
sounds.
started at a, it
I
started
feel
at a,
like you're teaching so much. By the way, this is actually great, and I'm getting a lot of insights that kind of breaking the stigma of I guess like a lot of publishing and this and what goes into it. And this is an amazing lesson, by the way. And it was really making me think about a lot of things and about how to approach something like this. Um, I want to say thank you for that in the first place.
well,
But also, you're also talking about
I was
design
afraid I
and
was going
mechanics.
to destroy your dreams or something. And that's right. But
No, I
the,
mean this is very insightful. This
okay,
is
well, I
something I
appreciate that.
think every culture should know, but
The,
not a lot of people get the opportunity to.
right, nobody ever said the nuked apple cart was wrong.
Right,
It's
right,
evil, divisive. Yes,
right,
that I did get. But the issue with then, okay, let's talk about commerce that isn't toxic. There's a fair contingent of the intellectual sphere who stops right there. They're like, nope, it is toxic. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Nobody pays me to have, a definitive opinion on that. I don't have the right degree and I don't have the university position where I get paid for opining about whether commerce itself is bad.
right.
If it isn't, then when isn't it? And that, I think, is the question that people should ask for themselves and say they have a role playing game that they would like to get out there, and say that they have a role playing game that they would, or rather, even that they say, well, maybe the guy isn't always a bad thing. Maybe there's such a thing as a guy who's good. And I'll help people get their games out there and I'll facilitate. And I have met people who think that, and they tried hard. A number of them tried hard. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I have had nothing but bad or ambiguous experiences that way. Two different warehousers that I worked with, whose job was to get things, to the distributors and handle the orders and stuff. Three,
Right.
in fact, three of those. Um, all three of which devolved into corruption within just a couple years. And all of a sudden, the money stopped coming. And then I went to the actual physical warehouse and I said, can I see your orders? And they were like, oh, yeah, here's your orders. And I'm like, dude, I haven't been paid for any of these, going to the guy who was supposed to be in charge, the people, company,
Right.
stuff
Right.
like
Right.
that. So, and books disappearing, or they go out of business and you never find them again. The people are gone. And your books are sitting in a warehouse, and the warehouse says, who's paying me for these? Every month I get it, is that you? Are they your books? So,
Wow.
stuff like that. I mean, I could go. I mean, this is very common from. Remember what I said about all the people who jumped in, right at the early 2000s. This is what they all did, or a great deal of them. Now, then you have something like Drive Through RPG, which looks great. Pump in your PDF and you're part of this huge platform and gets promoted and all sorts of great stuff. But they're cut of a cost-free product, a risk-free product for them. They use bookstore percentages, so they are
Wow.
they are abusive. I don't use Drive Through RPG. They are thieves. Done. But it's so convenient. It's all in one spot. Blah 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 blah. Thieves. So the um the question then is, well, what does a person do? What does I mean? I know what I do. I am
Like,
basically,
that's a follow-up question. Like, what
yeah.
do you do then in this situation?
Fortunately, I'm not trying to be the guy, right?
Okay.
My contribution ends with design, and that solves a lot right there. The other thing is simply to make these things clear and say, go into these shark infested waters and do, if you want, don't dangle your feet off the surfboard. Okay. That's learn how to do that. So there's that. And then, however, there's the point of what am I trying to do with Adam's play? Don't tell anybody it's a school.
Okay.
It's an
Right.
ongoing, somewhat anarchic curriculum in the sense that I learn as much as everybody else, and therefore what we talk about changes, or trying to keep kind of a bit of an institutional memory of points or lessons learned, not necessarily, packaged and delivered, but an institutional memory of lessons learned that can actually be consulted and thought about, with voluntary participation in deeper levels, with paying to be in a class or being on the Patreon or being in the seminar series and stuff like that. Some of which is free, some of which isn't. Um, and then, but the product of it is all free, right? In other words, anybody can watch the seminar, it's recorded.
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing, and because that's what I can live with.
For free on the website, by the way. That's just you can just go and find the seminar, or
Yeah, yeah.
easily.
Well, I mean, they're not run
Okay.
live; they're
Oh,
recorded.
yeah, right,
But yeah,
right,
um,
right, right.
and so yeah, I mean, go to Adepts Play and look at the seminar page, and you'll see exactly what I mean. I mean, if you would
Right.
like, for example, to well, no, I'm not going to brag. There's a lot of great shit on there. I
You
mean,
can go ahead and
with
brag.
people who have been doing role playing stuff for a really long time, or people who are just had a great time playing one day, whoever, right? Remember, I'm all about there is no status here.
You're right.
If you published a role playing game, it still means you're just a role player. If your games are distributed all over the world, fine. You're still just a role player to me.
Right.
So and if you're not playing, then screw you. You're pumping out ungrounded prose,
Right.
right? But who cares? I mean, I don't pay people for ungrounded prose, for God's sake. So or play their games. So the issue here is that I know what I'm doing with it, and shockingly enough, each year has grown a little bit. I started teaching for an Italian academy called Giano Academy, which is a nonprofit they have about gaming, basically a gaming school. And they asked me to do some design courses, and I had already been working up some courses for a couple of years, and 25 years in academia, I think in terms of coursework. And so therefore I started with them and told them, you're getting Adepts Play as an outside contributor, right? So these are my courses, and you're not yours, right? And so
Right.
that worked out very nicely, and I have a very nice relationship with Giano Academy. But on the times recently, I mean, once in a while, I mean, they're a nonprofit. They need enough people signing on so that then they can get the funding so that I can get paid, right? And
Right.
so, and that applies, across the board. But the point is that I'm realizing that, and they're okay with this, that I can also be teaching this stuff myself just off of Adepts Play now that the user base, right, has expanded. People have different schedules, can't make this class. So I'm doing that as well for roughly the same cost. Um, the um, so that curriculum though is really developing fast, and I would very much like to be involved with other institutions who would be interested in a guest instructor or an auxiliary instructor providing something like this nominally as part of their program if they like it.
Right.
That would interest me greatly at your university, for example. But anyway, the but anywhere in Europe, basically. Um, I'm I'm finally semi-educated in how you do commerce in the EU, and I can't bear the thought of trying to extend it anywhere else. So,
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
but anyway, the other thing too. So those are the things I'm doing.